What is up, everyone, and welcome to episode 40. Feels good to be at episode 40. We're like a nice even number, a good 10. Thank you so much for checking out episode 40 of the Trainer Scoop, where I am joined today by Nick Newport. Nick, thank you so much for taking time to come on and talk and tell the people a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Currently, I just recently graduated from Xavier. I have a bachelor's in exercise science, my CSCS, precision nutrition certificate, level 1, which is nice. But currently, I work at the Academy of Sports Performance, Blue Ash. I'm a performance specialist there, working with anywhere from like middle school to collegiate age athletes. The main tends to be in high school, but there we work with volleyball, soccer, baseball, just really all athletes. The largest audience seems to be volleyball, soccer, but I digress. And then on the side, besides that, I'm doing a bit of online coaching as well. I've kind of started that back in November. But aside from that, I've been lifting since 13, 14. You ever see that thing like when people like how you tell when you started lifting or when you gauge when you started lifting?
No.
Like, so they always goes like, you never go off of when you first started squatting or when you first started curling. You just go like, well, when did I first start bench pressing? Like, that's always what people go to. And it's like, that's when I started lifting.
Right.
So I was probably like 13. So it's going to make 10, 11 years. Not like hardcore training, but, getting in there. But since then, I've just always had a passion for lifting. And then that's manifested either in like doing some sports and more recently bodybuilding. I did a bodybuilding competition back in last October. That was the Kentucky Natural. I did Classic Physique and took the overall there.
Let's go.
Yeah, man. So, there's my little humble brag.
Yeah, that's impressive. And I will say, just from peeping your Instagram, I don't know Nick personally, funny backstory there that we'll get into, but just from peeping your Instagram, man, that physique was extremely impressive. So if you're listening or watching this on YouTube, take a second. If you're not operating any heavy machinery, Nick, what's your Instagram? I want them to go follow you.
Yeah, it's no_calves_Nick.
I love it. I'm right there on team no calves with you, brother. So
it was like everybody like I was like Fit Nick or like Nick Lifts or something like that. I'm like, everybody has that freaking page name or that has that thing. I'm like, okay, well, like what's not taken is like something fun. I'm like, okay,
I like that.
Yeah,
got alliteration. It's fun.
I was gonna get one of those Omar Esoff shirts, the team no calves, got the flamingo, arms crossed. I'm so mad I didn't get a tank.
Bro, that's like, I'm looking at my dresser right now. A good 75% of my shirts are from that company. So
that Rascal apparel is so cool.
Oh yeah,
I really need to get on that.
Oh yeah, it's good stuff. So the funny backstory, as I previously mentioned, is Nick and I never knew each other until recently. I think, and I don't know if this is gonna resonate with you, Nick, but you're familiar or friends with the dude? His Instagram name is like Prep by Scoob, right? His name's like Alex, I believe.
Oh yeah, Alec. Yeah, Alec. Yeah, we worked together at GNC a couple years ago. He was my prep coach for my competition, and he's like just one of my best friends in general.
Yeah. So I want to say either you saw me or I saw you on his page, and somebody hit somebody with a follow. But it's funny how those things work out because we actually probably grew up very close to each other. Like I almost live in St. Paris, Ohio. You went to Graham. We went to like rival high schools, and it's like we were mentioning in the DMs. It's just kind of rare to find people that are as passionate as we are about exercise physiology, training, nutrition in this little small section of Ohio. So definitely glad that we could connect, and very, very happy that we're going to bring this conversation out to the people, man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's better that we didn't meet in, like you said, rival high schools.
Right.
I mean, I was never like that, but like for basketball games and like football, like dudes would get so heated.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they would definitely turn up. I remember, what year did you graduate?
I was class of 2016.
Got you. So I was 15. And do you remember, I don't know if you were at the game, but they got into a huge fight on the football game or at the football game. And then the power went out at that point.
Yeah, dude, I almost forgot. Was that, that would have been, I think, my junior year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, it was just like a brawl out in the field, and then you hear a boom, and then everything goes dark.
Yeah, what was that, like a transformer exploded or something?
Yeah.
Dude.
Funny.
Like you can't script this stuff.
Honestly. So yeah, a little bit of a backstory there for anyone that actually cares. But I will say also from your introduction, you have a pretty cool and impressive background with, you know, not only the undergrad, but a CS, and a precision nutrition. So how do you feel like the education has kind of impacted you thus far and what you do with your training and your online coaching?
Yeah, so at least in my bachelor's, I almost kind of feel like it was a little lackluster at first because I like I said, I've been lifting like all throughout like high school. Like I think like my junior year, I was doing 2-a-days. Like I was lifting like compounds in the morning for like chest. I was like doing triceps at night. Like I was watching like Rich Piana and, you know, like just all the like YouTube videos at the time, like dudes like working out. So I was like, I thought I already knew like everything I needed to know, like typical Dunning-Kruger effect. But you know, so I get to college and it's like I'm taking anatomy and it's like, and then they're like a liberal arts school too. I'm like taking philosophy, things like that, which was like in hindsight, I'm really glad I took because I'm like, I think that's helping me like critically analyze things or kind of step outside of conventional ways of looking at things. But more so in the classes themselves, kind of like I think it was very useful to do the anatomy, physiology, kinesiology parts of that. It wasn't really until I think kind of sophomore year where I met my actually now boss. My boss now is actually was one of my professors at Xavier, so he hired me.
What class?
After I graduated. What class? Resistance training. So it was like he was teaching us like, you know, okay, this is how we squat, or we're gonna do this. And I was like, somebody's gonna teach me how to lift. I'm like, nobody's gonna do. And like I talked to the guy, and we were talking over like things about programming, things about powerlifting. Like we were talking about like one of the assignments he had us do was watch Bigger, Stronger, Faster. I was like, I'm gonna love this class. Like,
Oh yeah.
And from there, I was like, awesome. But in terms of like actual things, I feel like maybe there could have been a greater emphasis on not from his class specifically, from other classes and other things as course matter. I feel like there could have been maybe a greater emphasis on like programming and like maybe coaching in different aspects. We kind of focused on like general pop, but I interned with like the Xavier strength conditioning and like there was zero like programming in regards to like sport athletes. But you know, it's a useful background. I don't want to say that like, you know, we didn't touch on enough, but it was a good base to build on. But come time when I did do my internship with the Xavier strength conditioning staff, you know, read some books there, like Dan John, Pavel Sasuli, System, you know, general strength conditioning books. But I feel like more of the information that I've kind of garnered post grad has been more useful. Just in, I'm a big Renaissance periodization fan. I actually think like a lot of their content is super valuable. And even if you don't like go to school for exercise science, if you like watch like a lot of their videos, like you'll probably be better than not, depending on what your goal is. And I recently actually took the Prime biomechanics course and the John Jewett University thing. Like I've just been like piling these things on, just because I'm like, oh, why not? I got the time. But I feel like a bachelor's in kind of exercise science or something related in the area is a good base to build on if you had interest, because it's also kind of teaching you how to learn, giving you the intro to all these kind of like complex subjects and be a little difficult to try to teach yourself. Mm-hmm. But from there, I think it's important to kind of step outside of the box that kind of creates, because they'll tell you like, oh, hypertrophy is 8 to 12 and you take minute breaks, and strength is 3 to 5 reps with this amount of, it's like, I guess. But yeah, I think it was a really good experience, and it had a lot of insight that I still do use today. I think in how it applies to like kind of my coaching job and kind of my online coaching as well. I think that's been more of that continued education that has been a bit more valuable, because in school or in kind of these things, they kind of teach you like from the averages, or this study says that these people resulted from that. But the thing is kind of like nobody is an average. I mean, not to be cliche or anything, but if you look at like studies from like volume, like responses or intensity things, just like that, like the average will be within this and whatever standard deviation. But if you look at like raw data, like there will be people who like respond super well to high volume, or people who respond super well to low volume. And that's kind of like what the real world is. It's like I mean, chances are I'm going to get somebody who's in the middle, but chances are also that I could get someone who's like, all right, they're not growing off of this, or they're not responding to this, so we have to do something. So really long-winded way of saying that it's useful, but I think continued education has been, and just actual experience in coaching itself has been like irreplaceable.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, as you could agree, and as many people that go through undergraduate programs can agree, just the ability to think critically and evaluate your sources has been one of the longest lasting benefits for me, and
Yeah.
I'm interested also because you kind of have a similar path to me. A lot of the kids that I went to school with continued on to do grad school, maybe because they wanted to do PT, or maybe because they just weren't sure what they should do next. So I have a lot of similar experiences where like it was kind of underwhelming up until my junior year, which was really discouraging to go through that much school, and then you feel like you're not getting anything out of it. It's just like some hard sciences that you may or may not use, and like you said, you do use them to some extent. But
Yeah.
it eventually does get more interesting as you get a little bit more advanced with the coursework. And I think for anyone out there that is listening, that's maybe in our shoes, the first couple of years of school, just it's a grind, but keep pushing, because it really will pay off, and the knowledge that you'll gain will be very practical for whatever you decide to do within the field. But
Oh yeah. I mean, at the time, you're not going to have like, don't ask your professor, when am I ever going to have to explain the Krebs cycle to somebody? Because that's just going to make your professor hate you. Just learn the Krebs cycle, do the work, get over it.
definitely. And I'm right there with you with continuing education as well, man. I think it's awesome that you're doing these further programs with, getting the nutrition cert, the CSCS, and, stuff that's online and free as well, like the Renaissance periodization.
Like, it's so valuable, but it's like literally just out there in mass and free. And I think people have this like misperception because it's like just so readily available. Like, oh, there's not much to it. It's like, that's a gold mine.
Yeah. Yeah, man. The have you read the Principles of Hypertrophy book?
I have. It's been a little bit, but I bought it because I was talking about that book for a year before it came out. I was like, as soon as it comes out, I'm gonna buy it.
Yeah, I'm almost done. Kind of been sporadic with it within the past month, but just crazy insightful information for coaches, like particularly just because we can nerd out on this together. The way that they kind of auto regulate fatigue and recovery, it's so cool to me. And like, you can implement that with your clients and vastly improve your programming. And just, it's in a book that was like $30 or something.
Oh
So
yeah, 100%. I mean, like I myself, like I adopted the soreness metric just in part for programming because I think that's super useful as far as like because I do like to use for like my general anybody, like most of the people that I'm training that are going for hypertrophy, or that's kind of a physique base is their or they have physique based goals. I do like progressing volume, and I think a lot of Renaissance periodization's work has kind of been it's been a huge influence on that. It's been a direct influence on that. So using that soreness metric, some of the other metrics are a little difficult, or like, it's at what point am I giving this client information overload of like have to fill out these things, like nitpicking things, like how's your pump 0 to 3? How is this 0 to 3? It's like,
definitely.
tell me how sore you were.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned that as well. I had that loaded up on everybody's profile. And eventually, after discussing it, like some people would fall off the response. I'm like, hey, what's going on with this? Like, are you just not doing it? Or like, do you not find it valuable? And it's just like, I don't know. Like, it's really a lot to think about. I'm kind of just like training, and I get it. Like you said, it can be information overload. One interesting thing, I'm not. You may or may not know this guy. His name's Mason. He was an intern for Elite FTS and did a lot of their content.
I think I saw that on your profile. I went through your profile.
Yeah. Honestly, like a like-minded, you would get along great with him. He said something that I was like, yeah, I could definitely see that. If someone like avidly consumes RP, he was like, I would almost trust them, or I would trust them more than someone with like a basic undergrad exercise science degree to be a coach. And I was like, yeah, man, I could definitely see the case for that, just because it's interesting, like you said, how the curriculum maybe doesn't focus as much on things that a lot of us would use, like programming, client management, all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
I
that's an
mean,
interesting sentiment.
yeah, I mean, I was during my Xavier strength and conditioning internship, I actually got to like bounce around a couple places of like these other gyms in Cincinnati that our strength coach had connections with.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the places I got to go was Beat Personal Training, and they're a good place. It's run by these I think two dudes named Matt and Jason. Matt used to train at Westside, and Jason is like this also just a huge MF. He's a big dude, big strong dude, and actually friends with my bosses. So, anyways, I forget what the exact thing was one day, but Jason, I was just talking to him because I'm literally like picking people's brains for information. He was telling me, I can't remember the context, but it was, if you're reading books or if you're reading these books for information, that's your source, you're already behind. And it's like, because this information is not like, it's not like radically changing every day, but people are like finding new things every day. Like if you look at like, and that's kind of like where I look at like our curriculum. Like, you know, if you did like, did you have the NSCA textbook? Was that kind of like your basis for learning? Or that was a big part of like our learning stuff. And the NSCA updates stuff every now and then, but they're still kind of like just all right. But you know, that's where it comes into that continuing education, you know, buying courses or buying these books and things like that and reading that versus like if you're just relying on this kind of like older thing that's like it was old when it came out, you know. It's like you got to be on the forefront sometimes, depending on who you're working with. Like, of course, if it's like general clients, like most things are going to work for you depending on what you want. But when you're working with dudes who have these aspirations and you want to provide a good service, it's like I got to learn something.
Yeah, definitely. To kind of transition off of that, did you self-coach for the show that you did, or were you working with someone?
Yeah. So on the nutrition side of things, that was my buddy Alec.
Mm-hmm.
He's Alec _ Scooby Prep on Instagram or something, but he's a registered dietitian. He went to UC. We worked together at GNC for like a year, and we both just kind of like shake our heads at like people came in like, man, I can't believe they're buying this BS. But not like we were trying to sell BS, but like we're telling them not to buy stuff and they're still buying it. But anyways, so he handled the nutrition side of things, and then I pretty much just handled my training. I felt like I had a pretty good handle on training. Looking back, there were definitely things that I could have done much better, but I feel like you kind of need that first experience to kind of be like, all right, this is what I do. Because like that was my first show. So I was like, what's fatigue management? What's doing this? And like, I also I've become much more well-read in like the past like 2 years. So in that year, it was kind of like, okay, I'm prepping, working, and trying to learn all on a diet brain. So let's see how this goes. But I had a little bit of help with posing at the end, just because I also was just kind of freestyling the posing, which worked out, but I was definitely not great at posing.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty impressive that you were able to get the win with so much, I mean, trial and error. Everything's trial and error, but
Yeah.
doing the first time, that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, man, it was a great experience. Like even if I would have lost that day, like I mean, like I stepped there and like all the nervousness just like washed from my body. Like before anything else, it was just like, because it's something I wanted to do since I was 15. So it was just like gratifying to like finally do that thing that I've always kind of been training for.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
So did you find that it was simply more of like I'm not necessarily confident with my knowledge base for nutrition, or was it more so like the accountability factor of working with a coach for a bodybuilding show for you personally?
I think it was a bit of both. I definitely was not as comfortable as I am now on the nutrition side. And also like Alec is just like, that's my dude.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen kind of the things he worked with, people he like worked with. I mean, I was his first prep client, but just from talking to him and working with him, and, like hanging out with him, he's just like knows his stuff like the back of his hand. So and then like, but the accountability was huge. Like I didn't know it maybe at the time, but looking back, accountability and just having that like that person to be that support for you is huge. Just because like in prep, like have you ever done like a hard diet or like a yeah. So it's like you kind of like have your own mind working against you in terms of like if you're kind of hypertrophy oriented, you're like, oh, I'm getting small, or like I seem to be getting weak, or oh, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I think I need to be a little bit leaner, or oh, I need to, lose this weight, or oh, how many weeks out? Oh, I've already lost, or man, this isn't going to go well. Like just getting, and maybe that's a bit me more so. I'm sure there's other people out there who had that too, but I was just always in my head about, was I making the right decision? So it was kind of nice to just have that person there who was legitimately putting their best foot forward. And like, it was like, if he thought there was anything that I should be doing, he would tell me to do it. But I would just had to execute what he gave me because that was the best plan, and it kept me sane.
Yeah.
So it was huge. Having a coach there was huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when I do another hard diet again, I'm definitely going to use a coach. So I did like the Renaissance periodization, like transformation challenge, and it went really well. There's a couple snafus here and there. One time I went to visit my a friend in Pittsburgh, and we didn't realize it was St. Patrick's Day weekend. So I was like, all right, we're drinking. No, yeah. but I think for me, I think the accountability would be huge because, like you said, you can make little, or rather, you second guess yourself, or you make justifications like, oh, this will be okay.
Yeah.
And when you have that like hard set guidelines and someone that you have to report back to, it can definitely be big.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely a huge help.
Mm-hmm. So before we get into the meat of the discussion, just to get to know you a little bit better for everybody out there and for me, what's the next goal on the horizon for you?
Yeah. Well, the big push for me recently has been my online coaching service. And I've just recently like submitted like my final form. Like I made a post and this was like a whole 2-month process. Like, have you ever do you have like an official business title or anything like that? Yeah. It is such a pain in the ass for anybody listening. Like just grit and bear it. Just like make those phone calls you don't want to make and just talk to people you don't want to talk to, because no guide online is super helpful in starting your business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better than not, but anyways, yeah, that's probably like my, I'd say probably one of my top 2 goals. I mean, that is a newer one, is really kind of like establishing and growing my online coaching service. But I would say like my other probably more primary day-to-day goal is just to really grow as a strength coach, because that is my more kind of pertinent and day-to-day role. And it is something I do really enjoy, just like those working with athletes. I really just want to kind of grow as a coach, because it's one thing to kind of grow the online service as a business and things like that. But that in-person impact, like working with especially these high school kids, I mean, it's not been like uncommon. Like there'll be kids that like I see myself in them, because it's like I want to be that person that I needed when I was in their shoes. So I really want to grow in that role and just kind of be more comfortable,
Yeah. That's a really good answer, man. Personally, for me, one thing I've always struggled with, like when I asked that question, I'm not gonna lie, I was like thinking the context would be training. Like I thought that's what you were gonna answer with.
Oh,
but I mean, the fact that you said that, it just goes to show that there's seasons in life. Like obviously, when you were prepping for that show, that was probably a major priority. And then if I would have asked you at that time, that you would have said either 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to get caught up in that mindset that I have, like, oh, training.
I'm right there with you. Like that was a good answer, but like in the back of my head, I'm like, man, it'd be nice to like rep 315, or man, it'd be nice to squat this. Like it's there.
Yeah, but I think it just goes to show it's completely okay to have those seasons in life where, like, let's use the analogy of like, let's say you have a lagging muscle group, right? Like for me, my legs always. So I'm gonna make a mesocycle or a macrocycle, maybe even, to bring up my legs, and other things are gonna have to go down to maintenance.
Yeah.
So maybe other aspects of our lives, because also I want to grow my business. We're early 20s. That's gonna be other things might have to go into maintenance while you focus on something. So yeah, it was just like a cool perspective, man. I appreciate you saying that and helping me realize things along the way as well.
Oh yeah, no, for sure, man. I mean, it's like the saying. It's like you can't like. I mean, like it's like try cooking like 5 meals at once. It's like you're not gonna cook all 5 meals great. I
Right.
mean, not like some bodybuilding prep, like, oh, I got my things for the week, but like try cooking 5 completely different top tier meals at once. Then it's like you can't. They're all either gonna suck or one's gonna be great, or you can have a couple that are really good, some that are all right. So it's just like that.
Right. Hold up though. I'm gonna get out my rice cooker. I'm gonna get out my George Foreman, my air fryer. No.
Air fryers are game changer, man.
Oh, game changer. Absolutely. Very cool though, man. And I hope once again that everybody will follow Nick just to see this business growing. See, I'm sure you'll keep us updated on training as well. But
Oh yeah.
I think that's the cool thing about the podcast, about doing these YouTube videos. It's just like expanding the audiences, connecting people as well. So appreciate you sharing that, man.
Oh, for sure.
So, as we discussed in the DMs, it always goes down in the DMs. One thing that you're particularly passionate about, Nick, is programming, the importance of periodization, programming strategies, or maybe the argument of if they are super important as it relates to hypertrophy training. So, definitely want to open the floor up to hear your perspectives on all those things.
Yeah, certainly. So, at least in terms of, I'm glad you said specifically hypertrophy. That makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
But so for hypertrophy, if you're like a guy who's just like, you're not particularly into bodybuilding, but you're like, I just want to be jacked. It's like periodization is honestly probably going to have limited application. Are you familiar at all with John Kiley?
Surprisingly, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. So I'll actually send you, he's got a couple papers, and his big thing actually has been kind of talking on this concept of periodization as it being this kind of like magical thing that can accomplish these things. And that's more for like kind of like sports training, or maybe like you could talk about powerlifting and other things. But anyways, he's a really good source on that. And he talks about periodization is having these limitations. And we kind of look at periodization as this this like sequential or this like logical sequential organization of training phases leading towards a goal. But in and of itself, it's like making these like hard assumptions. It's like, if we look at like you're like 4 different macro cycles in a row, it's like, okay, we're going to do 8 weeks of this, like 10 weeks of this, we're going to train this percentages, this is our goal. It's like loosely that is okay, but if you try to ride it that hard, like it's going to go off the rails quick, as like without getting like too like abstract or in-depth or out there already. It's like human body is basically like this like black box of like, we can like have a pretty good idea of what our input is going to mean in output, but we with 100% certainty, like I just don't see a value in sitting down for hours to make it a whole like macro cycles in a row of this laid out perfectly planned, do this like this with these exercises, this percentages, only for like a quarter of the way through to be like, well, something came up, so we can't follow the plan anymore. And that's not even specifically the only downside of periodization, but even in like, let's look at it for hypertrophy. Like, let's say I was going to do, and I don't have any other goal other than hypertrophy. If I'm going to do an 8-week macro cycle, and then it comes for maybe, let's say, exercise rotation or swapping something out, it's like, if these exercises are still, giving me progress and I'm still riding high off of these, like, why would I stop while I'm like doing good? Well, why would I stop while I'm ahead? And again, that's not to say like periodization isn't useful, but I think it has limited utility in that aspect. Mm-hmm. And I could keep like riding with a tangent off it. I mean, at any point, if you ever want to like ask a question or stop me, just like say something, because if not, I'm going to keep rolling through. But in terms of bodybuilding, even there, I think periodization is, in terms of training, still is going to have limited application, just because when you're training for hypertrophy, it's like one of the most forgiving adaptations. And I think that's why there's so much arguments and semantics on what's the best way to build muscle, is because you look at research, it says 5 to 30 reps, 30 to 85%, 1 rep max. You work within those confines, train in close proximity to failure, volume equated, frequency, this, whatever. It's like all have similar outcomes. And again, that's not showing like raw data or the individual results. That's showing like across averages, we get the same outcomes. But of course, when you're bodybuilding, you're not training like an average. You're kind of training at an extreme, and you're looking at like higher frequency, higher intensity, higher volume training generally. But anyways, periodization as it applies to bodybuilding would probably be more applicable in terms of, well, indirectly going to have an effect on training, because if you're training for a show, you're probably going to have everything periodized around this. So you're going to have your off season and then like your prep and then, peak week going into that. So your performance and training there are largely going to be dictated by your recovery capacity. So, off season. So, okay, we can handle more intensity, more volume, or maybe we need less to grow or get whatever desired outcome we're going for, versus in comp. Okay, my recovery capacity is affected, so I have to provide a strong stimulus to hold on to as much muscle as possible, but I can't build up too much fatigue because I'm in this prep. So any time off or any time sidetracking is detracting from show day and all these other things. And that's kind of also where it's like periodization. Like, why would I make an entire training thing going in for like my contest prep or like a show? Like, why would I lay out, like I prepped for 22 weeks. So having the coach on the nutrition side of things to handle that was great, but we also largely everything was auto-regulated. Like my training, I kept volumes pretty consistent. I did push-pull leg split 6 times a week. Well, I tried. I actually tweaked my back literally the first day of prep. Safety bar squat. I did like 335 for 7 reps to a 12-inch box. And that I was completely fine after, but like an hour later, I was just sitting on a bench looking at my phone, and then I had to do something for work, and I sat up off the bench and my back clicked, and my girlfriend had to help me put my socks on for like a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went to and that's the other thing, like off of that, like, because I was so in my head about, tweaking my back again, I just took, again, I wouldn't have taken 2 weeks completely off of training. I probably would have tried to do some accessories or other things, but like at a point, like laying on my back was like painful, like even for presses or flies or things like that, or doing things that didn't directly involve me using my back as a support. Even if I was supported, it still hurt. So I was like, all right, guess I'm doing machine work. So it was just leg extensions, leg curls, lunges, things like that. So it's again, like if I would have like periodized a whole training program in advance, it's like I would not have counted for tweaking my back or for, hey, this day you're getting a refeed or you're getting 100 extra carbs. It's like, so it's all these things that we encounter in the day-to-day that we don't account for on that day. And I feel like kind of limits periodization, at least in terms of being a hard, steadfast cutoff. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of that on periodization.
Yeah. It is very, very interesting how, one, just the fact that, you can make a whole plan and then something happens where you have to
like that
from it. Yeah. Also, just like an anecdotal, I guess, experience. When I worked at a gym, it had a very wide variety of personal trainers. Like I was mostly like the strength expert, not expert, but you know what I mean. And then there was one guy that was like super into bodybuilding, and he would just do the most bizarre things, like using machines that like in completely ways they weren't intended to be used. Yet he still had a very impressive physique, and he coached some people to have very solid results, whether they were serious about bodybuilding or just wanted to gain muscle. And we had a discussion once where I was kind of like, oh man, like, is what you do just random? Like, do you just think about it on the day and run with it? Or like, do you have any kind of plan? And he was like, man, like what you do is just like foreign to me. Like there's like equations, there's like numbers and percents that you have to factor in if you're peaking for a powerlifting meet. He's like, for me, it's more so on feel. And I was like, okay, interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or you go ahead.
Yeah, and I think there is a place for basic periodization or progression in hypertrophy training, but that really opened up my eyes to the wide possibilities of what you could do and be successful.
Oh yeah, and that's to even say, like, the knocks on periodization themselves aren't knocks on programming, because that's the thing. A lot of times people will kind of use them synonymously as programming and periodization. It's like they're not the same thing. Like programming, essentially you could put it basically as like the organization of training variables around a central goal, Whereas like periodization is kind of like the organization of training phases around a central goal.
Mm-hmm.
So within programming, it's like we are making some assumptions about how we will react to these inputs, but those are typically, like you said, it can be based better off of like that guy said, like kind of in the field or day to day or like in that moment, or we can even like see like with these averages or what we know from like research, it's like, okay, you're most likely going to respond to this, or within this range, we're going to get kind of most likely this adaptation. Versus periodization, I mean, we're making assumptions based on lengths of phases, durations, like putting this in front of this or before this. Like, I mean, there are times where it's like, okay, if I've done a lot of macro cycles or if I've done a lot of mesocycles with just hypertrophy, maybe it might be beneficial to do a low volume phase just to resensitize those pathways, give connective tissue a rest, let myself resensitize to volume.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might be like, okay, I'm going to do a metabolite phase, like going to increase my work capacity, work for those higher reps, find that I'm being limited there. So there are things like that you can use kind of in sequence, but it's just that hard, steadfast, like this is the plan kind of aspect of periodization that is just, I find kind of limiting.
Yeah. And especially going through your experience, and I'm sure how many preps go, there are a lot of like practical implications to it.
Yeah, but if that's all on the periodization, I'm all for. Or is there any more you want to talk on periodization, or you want to?
Yeah, well, so as we mentioned, RP, Renaissance periodization, in their kind of like progression of starting at like 3 to 4 RIR, working your way up to a crazy like peak week of a mesocycle where you're doing a lot of either 0 RIR or intensity techniques. Do you typically structure your training or your clients' training like that, or is it kind of just like more off of feel, or how does that work within your own practices?
Yeah, so I would say that I do use it like a comment. I do use RIR within a lot of my clients' training, but I think there's also it's kind of just based off a client feel as well. My one client I'm working with, Donnie, he's on my Instagram. He's a guy who lost 30 pounds. And we just don't use RIR. We don't use a lot of those metrics kind of mentioned in the book. Mm-hmm. I am able to kind of get the soreness one. I think soreness is just useful because that's one kind of everybody can relate. But it's kind of like that information overload we were talking about earlier, where it's like, you know, if I have a guy who's just like, he wants to like muscle up, get in shape, or just kind of like wants to feel better physically, it's like, well, I don't need to, you know, throw like, okay, how was your muscle pump? Do you feel like fatigue is this? Especially if they're like somebody who hasn't been recreationally working out. Like he was a dude who like worked out with sports, and, you know, he kind of worked out on the side, but it was mostly sport driven. So when you have people who kind of come from that aspect, it's like, am I going to discourage them by overwhelming them and giving them all these things to focus about? Or can I reduce it down to what are the most central important parts that I kind of want them to get a feel for? And then we could just derive results from that. Mm-hmm. But for some of my like guys who are like more physique based or like looking to like do bodybuilding, I'm like, I think RIR is a super useful metric. And I think aspects of that are useful. I've tried implementing it in a variety of ways, like a couple different guys. And I found like 4 RIR is just, that's just a hard sell for anybody. Like I've had like my super serious guys do it. I've had guys who are kind of like, you know, more just general clients like trying. It's like, anytime you have somebody doing something at 4 RIR, there's kind of like, yeah, I didn't feel like I really did anything. And granted, like, again, a true 4 IR on like something like a leg press or, you know, something that's really hard is going to be challenging, but it's like structuring an entire week around that is a little, it's like I said, it's just hard to sell. But I find like if you can really keep the majority of training within like 0 to 2 RIR, I feel like that's kind of the sweet spot. And most people can kind of gauge, it's like, okay, I had about 2 reps left. You know, I think it's like kind of easier for them to key up on versus 4, because it's not like, you know, like linear. It's just kind of like exponentially, you know, I feel like it's almost kind of like working with RIR kind of almost feels like doing work with like accommodating resistance. It's like, okay, these reps are plugging along, and then that one rep catches you and you're like, spotter.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So
okay, go ahead. That was
yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think, of course, as we mentioned, you know, that the importance or lack thereof of going through like a hard set routine and progression. It brings me back to, you know, like Dr. Mike Israel will say, like, you start out at, you know, 3-4 RIR and you progress up. And then also when I first really got into hypertrophy training, I ran one of the older John Meadows, may he rest in peace, program. I can't remember which one it was, but like everything was like a RPE 8 for the most part. There's a couple like 9, or, crazy intensity techniques, but still, like, obviously he and tons of other people got great results from that style. So
Yeah, and I think that's another like important thing that I just kind of want to briefly like touch on is that I think there is also this kind of certain like subset of people that, or like I was in that personally, and I see a lot of people still kind of in it. It's like if this figure of influence or this person says that this tool or style of training isn't useful, then I'm not going to do it. Or they said this was suboptimal, so I'm not going to train like that. And I mean, it's not just hypertrophy. It's like even like bodybuilding or like powerlifting and other things like other recreational strength sports. You're going to see people like be like, oh no, I'm only doing this at like RPE 7, or oh, I'm only going to train like this because so said so. It's like I think there's a certain amount of people who are like just kind of not paralysis by analysis, but just kind of like afraid to do things that are kind of out of the box of what's been useful, what's not useful. Like all of this is just a tool, it's like just kind of like that. Like it's easy to say now in the shoes that we're in because we've been training for a bit, we're familiar with the material. We can auto regulate more easily versus somebody with maybe like a third of the training experience or like kind of the knowledge is kind of like, I don't know what to do. And for them, I just kind of be like, pick something that you believe in, pick something that you think is going to be beneficial, or even just try something out if you're curious about it and see what happens. Just like track your weight, take pictures, or, get whatever simple data you can. And if you like using accommodating resistance for hypertrophy, you like adding chains, bands, or if you want to do GVT, if you want to do like German volume training, or if you want to do like dog crap training with like the loaded stretches and things like that, just try it, or take pieces from each. I'm not saying like put together a Frankenstein program where you're going to like RPE 10 yourself every workout the first week and like just be done with it, never want to work out again. But don't be afraid to like try things that are like, kind of difficult, or, things that maybe other people have different opinions on, or things that are kind of like conflicting. You know what I mean?
yeah. And like you said earlier, I'm going to try to paraphrase it, but like it's more so like the individual and raw data rather than the averages, because like you said, everybody has different responses. So
definitely. Yeah, 100%, man.
And we will make the caveat of don't ever fucking try Joel Seedman's stuff. Just go ahead and block him and report him. No, I'm kidding.
Literally, that stuff makes me so mad. Like, I don't know why I haven't just like blocked it, or why I still like, I don't follow him, but like people will post it and like I go to his profile and I look at it, I'm just like, why would anybody do this? And it's this like whole like cognitive dissonance thing of like these pro athletes like are like, yeah, I'm a pro athlete on this team, I really got to do something good. And it's like they go to this guy who's pulling things out of a hat, throwing a dart, and like saying like, okay, guess we're doing eccentric, isometric, suitcase hold at 90, superset, yoke bar press. Like, where is your progression? But like these like athletes go and it's like, oh wow, this B stance suitcase squat at 90 was hard, and because I'm such a good athlete and it was hard, it must mean it's good. It's like, no, dude, just go to your strength coach, do some power cleans, do some whatever. Not saying you have to do Olympic lifting, but that's a whole other can of worms. But just do some good lifts, do some stuff hard, and you'll get better.
Yeah. One of my clients sent me the yoke bar press. He was like, WTF? Question mark. I'm like, dude, I don't know either. Trust me.
Do you know who or do you follow Australian rugby or rugby strength coach on Instagram?
Yeah. Yep.
I love that dude. Did you watch their debate on YouTube? It was Joel and they have one on YouTube. I highly recommend you watch it. It's Joel Seedman getting taken to town by Kier. It's so good.
Yeah. So if a client or someone that's seeking advice comes to you with that kind of like, lost in the sauce, cognitive dissonance, what are some of the ways that, I mean, obviously, like you said, send the athletes to a strength coach, but to maybe like a more general practical audience, what are some of the things that you would tell them to navigate through the sea of different advice and opinions out there?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost, or like one of the most important things I learned was just be wary of anybody who has all the answers or has the only answer.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's like the biggest thing is just like, for me at least, it's like my recent quip has been people like, oh, like not that this is a big ongoing thing, but it's like flexing your spine under load is like in some circles seen as this like ultimate sin in which your like spine will disintegrate and you'll blow out a disc and all this stuff. So those are like another people that like, I mean, I almost think they're as bad as Joel Seedman.
Like the hyper focus on like form and corrective movement.
Yeah, and like this like arbitrary model of human movement in which
Yeah.
you break out of these confines, you're either suboptimal or asking for injury. Like look, and then just like a tangent off of this. Like if you look at like you'll see guys like what's a good example? Like do you know like do you follow anybody on Instagram like that like says like don't like John Rusin? Do you know who John Rusin is?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, guys, like, oh no, don't do that. It's bad. It's like, if you look at like world's strongest man, like when they're doing Atlas stones, what are they doing? Flexing their spine, holding a 500-pound concrete ball, raising it up on a platform. Like, or Ed Cohn, one of the greatest powerlifters of all time. What did his deadlifts look like? Was it flat back? It's kind of more like one of those.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just one of those like. The other thing that is just like be wary of anybody who's like putting these like kind of limitations or kind of these boxes around you, kind of like gatekeeping of sorts.
Yeah.
So it's just like almost like with anybody who has the answers, be cautious of someone who's like selling you a problem or creating a problem that comes with a solution you can buy. That's probably the other big piece.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I'm not sure if you're familiar with the it's one of like it's an old book, but like it's called like Smoke and Mirrors or something to that effect. Just
I don't think I'm familiar.
Yeah, just basically how, and not just within fitness, like every industry, there's just so much maybe not like lies, but like leading people down incorrect pathways.
Yeah.
People capitalize off that and make money. I thought that was an interesting little blurb that I've read out of that book, and very pertinent and true in the fitness industry. And I think
100%.
lines that you provided, man, I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. I mean, that's 100% those things have been most useful for me. I mean, and it's just also kind of going back to that school base of like kind of learning how to critically think. It's just like you kind of like going from this accepting information to does this like I think like people like even in bodybuilding or hypertrophy, it's just like follow things that aren't hypertrophy, follow things that aren't bodybuilding, follow people who powerlift, follow people who do strongman, follow people who just do like random weird lifts. Like get out of the box of like kind of those things that like because in every like circle or like group you find yourself in, there's going to be kind of this like lingo and all these ideas and thoughts like you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. But like if you follow like these other guys, they're like talking about like same concepts, like how to manage fatigue or how to work with these things, and like they have like good ideas as well. It's like that you can like not directly apply maybe, but still like can be applicable to your situation in one way or another.
Yeah. That's the biggest pros and cons of social media as it pertains to fitness, I think, is like you just have that echoing chamber that can affirm or amplify certain thoughts, and then like you said, like keeping that well-rounded exposure can make you realize like, oh, this isn't the only way. It can help you just expand your potential. So good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and do you follow it's I think Fowler Fitness or Fowler something on Instagram?
I don't know.
I don't know his exact Instagram handle, but I'll send it to you. Super like abstract, kind of like philosophical approach. Like some of his stuff gets a little kind of like out there and kind of like we just took the red pill, but it's just one of those things where it's like encouraging you to think on a deeper level of the why, the how. And this is actually like just another thing, I don't mean to keep segueing into things, but just context, I think, is another important thing that gets missed a lot just by like everybody from like the general lifter to the athlete to the coach. It's like, or let's start with the general like lay person who's into lifting, or maybe even let's just take hypertrophy because that's kind of the central focus. If you're looking at somebody who's like wanting to like build muscle, I mean, how many times like did you like, I mean, I did this, I'm sure you haven't, how many other people like look at a muscle mag and it's like, oh, here's Jay Cutler's workout, or here's his workout to get him. It's like, he did that, I'm going to do that. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not 300 pounds full of anabolics and have been training for 20 years. So my workouts are going to be structured a bit different. And I think there is kind of that same idea with when we look on Instagram or people look on Instagram, they're like, you know, this is the workout. Like, oh, try this workout. It's like this Gymshark page. And it's like, you know, some like BS, like 10 squats, like 10 squat variations on these other things. Or there's like these like weird, like if you ever even take like a basic programming class, like as far as exercise selection and like all these like other variables, it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And it's like the context is missing, or even things that aren't like horribly programmed, but it's just like, you know, if you look at anybody across the spectrum, if it's like versus you've been training 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 7, however many, like we're not seeing like what does the rest of that person's program look like? What is their medical history, their injury history? What is their current phase of dieting? What are their goals? Genetics, maybe let's look at their other phases, or just history. There's other things we don't see, but that but it's put out there, and people see that and almost kind of think that they need to take something similar. Now, there's not wrong with taking elements of somebody else's training or an exercise, or taking like a piece of information. I mean, that's how we learn. We just, you know, the old Bruce Lee quote. It's what is it? It's take what is useful, discard what is useless, make it uniquely your own. Something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
So and it should be that way. It shouldn't be like, oh, cut, copy, paste, like what is it, Control V, Command E, or something like that.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that for your own training. You need to like do a little bit of thinking, which is scary. People don't like to think, or people don't like to be wrong. They want to do things that are right. But, you know, don't be afraid to try things that, you know, maybe people don't agree on. Don't completely cut and copy somebody's workout and apply it to yourself thinking it's going to work because you're different than that other person. And just think like, how does this apply to me?
Yeah, man, I feel like that is great advice for the like everyday person out there that's looking to make progress in the gym, regardless of your goal. Like, you hit the nail on the head with that one, man. That was good. Cool.
I say something smart every once in a while.
Right. So I want to be mindful of your time, Nick, but I do have one closing question before we sign off here. So we hit the general audience. It being the trainer scoop, I like to offer some type of advice to people that are looking to make a career as fitness professionals as well. And we're still young to the game. We're not experts or, you know, claiming to be, but thus far in your coaching, in person and online, what's the first thing that comes to mind that's been a big learning experience for you? Yeah, it could be very general and broad with that, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, no, that's a good one though. I think in terms of that, I think another like, it's kind of general, but a piece of advice that's been super useful for me is just that keep an open mind. I mean, once you think that you've learned it all, or that you have nothing left to learn, it's like you're done. So just like, you look at everybody that you interact with, whether it's another coach, another professional, an athlete, or a potential customer, as a learning experience. You have something to learn from everyone, whether that's changing your belief or how you approach things, or whether that's maybe a reaffirmation and kind of consolidates what you've learned and what you thought was previously kind of the way to do things. Just use every experience, every moment, every person as kind of an opportunity to learn for betterment. Whether that's that somebody who presents like the same way as the last 10 people you've worked with, or whether that's somebody you've never worked with before, or somebody like, if it was a peer or a strength coach, or somebody who's like just has a completely contrarian ideology to how you typically approach maybe training or programming, or just some aspect of that, just use that as an opportunity to learn. I mean, it wasn't too long ago I trained with this guy, and we're not like on opposite ends of the spectrum, but like he definitely liked a lower volume, higher weight approach, and I've kind of been riding the more like moderate, higher rep, kind of higher volume approach, and kind of did work out more his style. Not that I've never done that before, but it was just like, man, that was a great workout. Yeah. So, you know, just kind of just break out of the walls. Like, you know, don't get too comfortable where you're at with your knowledge base, or even with like just with the boundaries you put on yourself. Just kind of always expand, always try to better yourself, always try to learn.
Yeah. Drop the mic right there. That was a good one, man. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking time to come on and talk. And when you come through the hometown again, We got
Oh
to
yeah.
link up. Maybe go through a couple workouts where I'll take you through one, you take me through one. That would be dope.
All right. Yeah, I'm for that. I'm up with it.
Awesome. So one more time, I want to plug your Instagram or anything else that you have going on that you'd like to share with people. So go for it, man.
Yeah, so you can follow me on IG. That's no_Cavs_Nick. And my online coaching service is Newport Physique and Performance. Anybody's interested or you just want to follow, just hit me in the DMs on IG or just, also, because I'm also going to show this on my story too. So why don't you plug your IG as well? Just so, we get it out there. I feel weird plugging mine by myself.
Yes, sir. If anyone would like to give me a follow, see more of the Trainer Scoop, random reels where I make memes out of pop culture and try to be informative every once in a while, follow dmart_training.
If that quarantine hits, man, you're gonna get the concrete weights. You gotta share that video again.
Oh yeah, yep. I'm gonna get it out there. I'm gonna run a black market gym where people pay me exorbitantly high prices per workout. It's gonna be a very capitalist experience. It's gonna be awesome.
Hey, yeah, man. There's always a dollar to be made.
I'm kidding. Yeah. So
crap, man.
Everybody, thank you so much. Please go follow and support Nick. Really appreciate everybody tuning into this episode. If you made it this far, I always appreciate feedback. Hit me in the DMs with any feedback that you have. And then, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, talk about some of the things you learned or some of the big takeaways from this episode. Hit me with a subscribe as well for more of the Trainer Scoop. And then if you're on Apple Podcasts, really appreciate a review. Regardless of if you think it's 1 or 5 stars, it's always appreciated. If you're on Spotify, you're kind of shit out of luck. There's not a lot you can do in terms of reviewing, but share it around with your friends. That's always helpful. So with all that being said, Nick, I think we're good, man.
Yeah. I appreciate you for letting me come on, man. I think it was a really good talk.
Yes, sir. Definitely. Nick, we're going to keep in touch. We're going to get some training in. Sure. And thank you once again to everybody that tuned in. We will catch you in episode 41.